Don Quixote Doflamingo. Where do I even start? Oda gave this man everything a protagonist gets. A tragic origin story that would make any Straw Hat's backstory blush. A coherent, philosophically airtight worldview. A code of loyalty to the people he calls family. Doflamingo works as a villain because Oda gave him everything a protagonist gets, and then showed exactly how all of those ingredients can produce a monster instead of a hero. He does not lack depth. That's not why he is evil. He is evil because he has all the depth and still chose this. And that is what makes him, without reservation, the greatest villain One Piece has ever produced, and one of the finest pieces of villain writing in manga, because Oda built him like you build a protagonist, and then inverted every single piece. Here is where Oda does something that most writers never even attempt. He gives the villain an origin story so devastating that, for a few panels, you forget what he becomes. Don Quixote Doflamingo was born a celestial dragon, a literal god in the One Piece world. He was born into absolute privilege, slaves, obedience, the right to kill commoners without consequence. This was his normal. Then his father Don Quixote Homing did something extraordinary. He chose to be human. Homing renounced the family's world noble status out of genuine moral conviction, believing his family could live among ordinary people with dignity. He moved his wife and two young sons, 8-year-old Doflamingo and 6-year-old Rocinante, to an unnamed northern country. What followed was a catastrophe. The family's former status was discovered. Citizens who had endured centuries of celestial dragon abuse poured their rage onto the Don Quixote family. People who had voluntarily given up the power those citizens hated. Their mansion was burned. They were driven into a shack on a garbage heap. Doflamingo's mother died of illness in the squalor. When Homing begged the other celestial dragons to at least take back his wife and children, they refused. The family of traitors was cut off forever. And then came the crucifixion, not metaphorical. An angry mob tracked down the remaining Don Quixotes and lynched them, nailed them to a wall, beat them, tortured them. Homing and Rocinante begged for mercy. Doflamingo did not. He screamed that he would kill every single one of them. His own father was horrified. The mob was horrified. His 6-year-old brother was horrified. This is the birth of the villain, and this is where Oda does something genius. He makes you almost understand it. An 8-year-old child, raised to believe he is a god, is stripped of everything, starved, watches his mother die, and is tortured by people who hate him for a crime he didn't commit. His father's goodness, his genuine goodness, is what caused all of this. Most villains get a tragic backstory as seasoning. A dead parent, a betrayal, something quick to generate pity. Doflamingo's origin is structural. It doesn't simply explain why he's angry. It explains his entire philosophy, his obsession with control, his view that kindness is weakness, and his pathological need to never be helpless again. It's the foundation to his entire character. But here's the thing that separates good writing from great writing. Oda doesn't stop there. He gives us a control case. Don Quixote Rocinante is, without exaggeration, the single most important character in understanding Doflamingo, more than Law, more than Luffy, because Rocinante is the proof that the tragedy didn't have to produce a monster. Same parents, same fall from grace, same starvation, same crucifixion. Rocinante endured every single thing Doflamingo endured. He was nailed to the same wall. He watched his mother die too. He was beaten by the same mob. And he grew up to be kind. Rocinante disappeared from Doflamingo's life after his brother killed their father at age 10, an act that left the younger brother traumatized and in tears. He returned 14 years later, silently, under disguise, as a marine spy working under Sengoku, infiltrating the Don Quixote pirates from within. His mission was singular: stop his brother, out of a sense of duty as a brother. And this is where Oda twists the knife, because Doflamingo loved Rocinante, genuinely. He called him his precious little brother. He warned Trafalgar Law, a child recruit, that if anyone harmed a hair on Corazon's head, Doflamingo would kill them personally. When he noticed a wound on Rocinante, he was visibly concerned. Then came Minion Island. Virgo reported Rocinante's betrayal, that he had been feeding information to the Marines. Doflamingo confronted him. Rocinante, in his final act, had already fed the op-op fruit to the dying child Law and used his own devil fruit to silence Law's cries as the boy hid in a treasure chest nearby. Doflamingo shot him, not once, multiple times, not in rage, not in the heat of battle, coldly, deliberately, while his brother lay on the ground protecting a sick child. Here's the question Oda forces you to sit with. Did Doflamingo feel anything? The manga suggests yes, and that's what makes it horrifying. He expressed contempt for his brother for forcing him to commit family killing a second time. Not regret exactly, something worse. Disappointment. A sense that Rocinante had made him do this. That love and murder could coexist because Rocinante violated the code. In Doflamingo's moral framework, betrayal is the one unforgivable sin. He loved his brother, and he killed him anyway, because the code demands it. The Doflamingo-Rocinante split is Oda's most devastating argument about choice. Same inputs, opposite outputs. If Rocinante can emerge from that crucifixion and choose silence, secrecy, sacrifice, and ultimately die to save a child he barely knew, then Doflamingo's evil is not purely the product of trauma. It is, at least in part, a choice. The trauma explains the anger. It does not excuse the empire. And Oda knows that. He never lets the reader settle into comfortable pity. Every time the backstory threatens to make you sympathize with young Doflamingo, the story cuts forward and reminds you what he did with that pain. The oscillation between sympathy and horror is deliberate. It is the engine of the character. Most villains don't get a philosophy. They get a motivation. Revenge, power, world domination, dressed up in a few dramatic lines. Doflamingo gets an actual worldview. Fully articulated, internally consistent, and partially correct. That last part is what makes him dangerous as a character. I think we all know of, or recognize the Marineford speech, delivered during the Summit War, while Doflamingo perched on Atmos's body and forced Whitebeard's own commander to attack his allies. Pirates are evil, the Marines are righteous. These terms have always changed throughout the course of history. Kids who have never seen peace, and kids who have never seen war, have different values. Those who stand at the top determine what's wrong and what's right. This very place is neutral ground. Justice will prevail, you say? But of course it will. Whoever wins this war becomes justice. This is one of the most quoted monologues in anime for a fair reason, and it deserves to be broken down line by line. These terms have always changed throughout the course of history. He's right. The One Piece world proves this constantly. The world government rewrites history. The Void Century was literally erased. Ohara was destroyed for studying the truth. Doflamingo is articulating something the story itself has confirmed. Morality in this world is written by the victors. Kids who have never seen peace, and kids who have never seen war, have different values. Also correct, a child raised in Flavance has a different concept of justice than one raised in Mary Jo. Doflamingo, as someone who lived in both paradise and hell, has earned the right to observe this. Those who stand at the top determine what's wrong and what's right. Here's where self-interest bleeds into philosophy. Because Doflamingo doesn't just observe this fact, he uses it. He uses it to justify his own ascent. If the powerful define justice, then becoming powerful makes you just. This is the step from observation to rationalization. And it's the step that separates Doflamingo from, say, Dragon. Whoever wins this war becomes justice. The final line is the villain's thesis in 7 words. And the brilliance of One Piece is that the story keeps partially proving him right, while simultaneously building a protagonist who embodies the opposite. Consider the philosophical positions of the 4 key players. Freedom is justice. The right thing is whatever protects the freedom of the people he loves. He doesn't argue with systems. He punches through them. The institution is justice. The Marines are right because they are the Marines. Order justifies itself. The system pretends to be justice. It must be dismantled and rebuilt. Justice is something you create by tearing down lies. Justice doesn't exist. There is only power wearing a costume. The strong rule. The weak serve. Everything else is theater. The unsettling thing, the thing that makes him One Piece's best villain and not just its most charismatic, is that the story keeps proving him partially right. The celestial dragons do define justice. The world government does rewrite history. The system is built on violence. Doflamingo's diagnosis of the world is disturbingly accurate. His prescription is monstrous. And the line between diagnosis and prescription, between seeing the world clearly and using that clarity to justify cruelty, that's the real subject of his character. Does he know his philosophy is a rationalization? The Marineford speech suggests he does. He delivers it with a grin. He's not anguished. He's amused. He has seen through the facade of the world and decided that the only rational response is to become the biggest monster in the room. That's self-awareness. The possibility that Doflamingo knows is what elevates him. A villain who believes his own delusions is tragic. A villain who sees through them and proceeds anyway is terrifying. Now let's talk about Oda at his most deliberate. Doflamingo's devil fruit is the string fruit. He literally controls people like puppets. The character whose entire identity is about domination, manipulation, and control over others' free will is given the power to physically override their bodies. A perfect metaphor to his character. Every major application of his devil fruit maps directly onto Doflamingo's psychology. Parasite. He attaches strings to people's spines and controls their movements against their will. At Marineford, he uses it on Atmos to attack Whitebeard's own crew. At Dressrosa, he uses it on King Riku to make a beloved monarch slaughter his own people. The technique doesn't just defeat enemies, it humiliates them by making them weapons against the people they love. This is Doflamingo's core pathology externalized. The need to override another person's autonomy. The need to prove that free will is an illusion. Birdcage, a dome of razor-sharp strings that traps an entire nation inside an inescapable, slowly shrinking cage. Nobody leaves. Nobody is free. Only Doflamingo decides who lives. This is Dressrosa as a microcosm of his worldview. A closed system where one man holds absolute power and the population's only option is to obey or die. String clone. He creates a perfect copy of himself out of string, his narcissism made literal. There should be more of him. The world needs more of him. Even death can't claim him if he can replicate himself. Internal organ stitching. When Law uses Gamma Knife to destroy his internal organs, Doflamingo uses his strings to stitch himself together from the inside. He literally cannot be destroyed because he refuses to stop controlling even his own body. This is the man who was tortured as a child and swore never to be helpless again. When Doflamingo awakens his devil fruit, the environment itself becomes strings, buildings, ground. The world around him transforms into an extension of his will. His control isn't just over people anymore, it's over reality itself. This is the visual thesis of his character, a man who wants to reshape the world until everything is his to control. Now compare this to Luffy. Flexibility, stretching, bouncing back from anything. Luffy's power is his personality. He bends, he absorbs, he bounces back. He's impossible to pin down. He's freedom as a physical force. Doflamingo's strings are the opposite. Rigid, binding, cutting, controlling. Their devil fruits are their philosophies made flesh. When Luffy's fist, the embodiment of freedom, punches through Doflamingo's strings, the embodiment of control, it isn't just a fight. It's a thesis being answered. Most villains stop here. Doflamingo doesn't. Doflamingo didn't just conquer Dressrosa. He didn't install himself as a tyrant through open violence and fear. He did something worse. He replaced reality. 10 years before the main story, Doflamingo arrived at Dressrosa and demanded 10 billion berries from King Riku III. Riku, a pacifist king beloved by his people, scrambled to gather the money to prevent bloodshed. Doflamingo had no intention of honoring the deal. While the money was being collected, he used his parasite strings to control Riku and his soldiers, forcing them to slaughter their own citizens. The beloved king appeared to go insane. The people despaired. And then Doflamingo stepped in, with Treble, Diamante, and Pika, and defeated the rampaging king, posing as the heroes who saved the nation. This is villainy operating on an entirely different register than anything One Piece had done before. This isn't Crocodile's Alabasta scheme, as clever as that was. Crocodile manufactured a civil war. Doflamingo manufactured a narrative. He made the people grateful he took it. And then came the toys. Sugar, a member of Doflamingo's crew, possessed the hobby fruit. Anyone she touched was transformed into a toy, and everyone who had ever known that person forgot they existed. Children forgot their parents. Wives forgot their husbands. Warriors who resisted Doflamingo were turned into living toys and forced into slave labor in an underground factory. And the surface world simply forgot they had ever lived. This is the most disturbing thing Oda has ever written, the kind where the lie is so total that even the victims don't know they're victims. Dressrosa under Doflamingo was a paradise where people genuinely loved their king, where the streets were full of laughter and the economy seemed prosperous, because all the suffering was invisible, erased from collective memory. Oda makes you ask whether Dressrosa under Doflamingo is really so different from the rest of the One Piece world under the Celestial Dragons. The world government erased the Void Century. It outlawed the study of poneglyphs. It destroyed Ohara to keep its secrets buried. The Celestial Dragons enslave people openly and rewrite history to justify their rule. Mary Jo is, in essence, Dressrosa at scale. A world where the lie is so old and so total that most people don't even know there is a lie. The boy who was cast out of heaven rebuilt heaven on earth. His own version, where he is the god and the suffering is hidden behind a curtain of erased memory. He is recreating the system that created him. He hates the Celestial Dragons who rejected him, and his response is to become exactly what they are, but better at it. The cycle of violence that the Celestial Dragons created, the same cycle that tortured a child on a wall, doesn't end with Doflamingo. It's perfected through him. The Don Quixote family and the Straw Hat Pirates are structurally identical. Both are found families built from society's rejects. Treble, Virgo, Diamante, Pika. They found Doflamingo as a child, recognized his power, and pledged their lives to him. They gave him a devil fruit and a gun. They swore to make him Pirate King. The elite officers have been with him for over 30 years. Doflamingo's care for his crew appears genuine. He expressed remorse at losing Monet and Virgo. He went berserk when Baby Five was insulted. He destroyed 8 towns to protect her from her own inability to refuse proposals. He refused to let anyone laugh at Pika's high-pitched voice. He thanked Virgo for his years of service before the man died. But look at the structure. Look at what happens when someone disagrees. Corazon disagreed. He was shot dead. Law disagreed. He was shot, beaten, and marked for execution. Viola was forced to serve through the threat of her father's death. Bellamy was used, discarded, publicly humiliated, and forced to fight Luffy as a puppet. The difference between the Don Quixote family and the Straw Hats isn't loyalty. Both crews are ferociously loyal. The difference is freedom. Luffy lets his crew leave. Sanji left for Whole Cake Island. Usopp left at Water 7. Robin tried to sacrifice herself at Enies lobby. And in every case, Luffy fought to bring them back. But he also respected their choice to go. The Straw Hats are a family where the door is always open. You stay because you want to. You leave because you need to. And when you come back, you are welcomed. Doflamingo never lets anyone leave. Members are useful or they are enemies. There is no middle ground, no room for disagreement, no exit. The blood law of the Don Quixote pirates means any act of betrayal or harm against a crew member is punishable by death. This is loyalty enforced by terror, not earned through freedom. Is Doflamingo's love for his crew real? Probably. That's the worst part. Because it means love, in his framework, is perfectly compatible with murder. He loved Rocinante and killed him. He valued Bellamy and discarded him. He respected Virgo and sent him to die. In Doflamingo's world, love is not a liberation. It is another form of possession. And here's what makes this brilliant characterization. It asks us a genuinely uncomfortable question. If Doflamingo's love is real, and the evidence suggests it is, does that make him more sympathetic or more terrifying? Oda's answer, delivered across 800 pages of Dressrosa, is unambiguous. More terrifying. A man who loves and still chooses cruelty is worse than a man who feels nothing at all. Bellamy is a minor character who carries a major thesis. He is what happens when someone gives their entire identity to Doflamingo's vision, and then the vision throws them away. Bellamy left a comfortable, wealthy life to become a pirate, modeling himself entirely on Doflamingo's philosophy. He flew Doflamingo's Jolly Roger, he mocked dreamers, and when he lost to Luffy at Jaya, Doflamingo punished him brutally, forcing his own crewmate Sarquis to attack him. Bellamy came back. He brought a golden pillar from Skypia as tribute. Doflamingo gave him a second chance, and then discarded him again, ordering his assassination after his loss in the Corrida Coliseum. During the birdcage, Bellamy confronted Doflamingo about the betrayal and was beaten savagely. Doflamingo mocked him as weak and used him as a human shield against Luffy, and yet Bellamy still couldn't fully turn against him. He fought Luffy one final time, not out of loyalty this time, but because he couldn't abandon the idol he had built in his head. This might be one of the most overlooked complex dynamics in One Piece. Bellamy's final scene isn't about a villain, it's about the wreckage a villain leaves behind. A man so broken by misplaced devotion that even after being betrayed, beaten, and discarded, he can't remove the collar because he fears his neck will fall apart without it. Bellamy eventually takes a piece of Luffy's Viver card and walks away to become an artist. Oda treats his recovery with remarkable realism. No dramatic epiphany, no sudden joining of the Straw Hats. Just a damaged person taking a break and slowly learning to stop being a follower. It's a small, quiet act of writing genius buried inside a massive arc. And it reveals something devastating about Doflamingo. Even his victims still believe in him. That is the power of charisma weaponized. That is the difference between a villain who is feared and one who is believed in. Oda doesn't waste a single design choice on Doflamingo. Every visual element carries narrative weight. Doflamingo never shows his eyes. In his entire history, childhood, adulthood, defeat, imprisonment, his eyes remain hidden behind those red-tinted lenses. The only exception is a single, tiny panel where he wakes from a nightmare about his childhood, and one eye is briefly visible. When a fan asked Oda what was behind the glasses, he jokingly drew another pair of glasses underneath. The joke is also the answer. There is nothing to see. Doflamingo refuses to let anyone see his soul. Eyes are the window to humanity. Doflamingo has boarded his up. Some do theorize he lost his left eye to the arrow during the crucifixion scene, citing his Jolly Roger's design, which features a slash across the left eye. This is unconfirmed, but thematically resonant. The wound from his childhood would literally be carved into his face, hidden behind a permanent mask of control. The coat, flamboyant and absurd. He dresses like royalty because he still believes he is royalty. The coat is a flamingo's plumage, beautiful, attention-seeking, and associated with paradise. Doflamingo is the corrupted version. Paradise built on suffering, beauty grown from filth. His name, his coat, his bow-legged walk. Flamingos are social, beautiful, and associated with tropical paradise. They're also pink because of what they consume. Doflamingo's beauty, likewise, comes from what he consumes. Other people's freedom, other people's memories, and other people's lives. When his awakening transforms the environment into strings, Dressrosa's buildings and streets unravel into white threads. The environment itself becomes an extension of his will. This is the visual thesis. Doflamingo doesn't just want to rule the world. He wants to be the world. Doflamingo was raised to believe he was a god. Then he was tortured for being one. His entire adult life is an attempt to become the god he was told he was, because the alternative is accepting that he is just a man who suffered for nothing. Every scheme, every power grab, every manipulation is aimed at one goal, proving that the fall from heaven was a mistake the world will pay for. He doesn't want to be Pirate King. He wants to sit on a throne and have the world kneel. The difference is everything. Every application of Doflamingo's power is a direct inversion of his childhood helplessness. He was powerless on that wall. Now he controls people's bodies. He was trapped in a world that hated him. Now he traps nations in an inescapable cage. He was tortured and could do nothing. Now he stitches his own organs together with strings rather than ever be vulnerable again. This is trauma response architecture so precise it borders on clinical. The birdcage is a psychological structure. It's the answer to a child who was once caught and couldn't escape. I will become the thing that traps. I will never be caught again. The most interesting question about Doflamingo is he self-aware? Does he know his philosophy is a rationalization? That winners become justice is just a prettier way of saying, I was hurt, so I will hurt everyone. And to be honest, the Marineford speech suggests he does. He delivers it with a grin, not with anguish. He's not rationalizing in real time. He's performing a worldview he adopted long ago. The impel down scene in chapter 906 reinforces this. Even in chains, in solitary confinement on level 6, he speaks calmly about assassins coming for him, about the throne wars about to begin. He asks Magellan if the prison will protect him, knowing full well that his knowledge of the national treasure makes him both valuable and dangerous. He is not broken. He is waiting. A man who waits in prison with a smile is either delusional or terrifyingly lucid. With Doflamingo, both might be true simultaneously. Step back from the character. Look at what Oda actually built. Doflamingo first appears in chapter 233 during the Jaya arc, a brief menacing cameo where he forces two Marines to fight each other and later punishes Bellamy from afar. He doesn't become the main antagonist until Dressrosa, which begins around chapter 700. That is roughly 470 chapters of slow burn buildup. In that span, he appears at Marineford, runs the auction house, pulls strings in the underworld, is mentioned by name as an increasingly dangerous power broker. By the time Dressrosa begins, the reader already knows three things. This man is powerful, this man is connected, and this man is terrifying. The payoff works because the setup was patient. We meet the villain first, then the philosophy, then the empire, then, only then, the backstory. Oda reveals why Doflamingo is evil only after we have fully understood how evil he is. This order is crucial. Sympathy comes after horror, not before. If we saw the crucifixion first and the Dressrosa coup second, we might excuse him. By reversing the order, Oda forces us, the readers, to hold two truths at once. This man was destroyed by the world, and this man destroys the world. Neither cancels the other. The backstory is devastating enough that, for a few pages, you almost feel sorry for the child on the wall. Then the story immediately cuts to the adult who turned an entire nation into slaves and erased people from existence. The reader is never allowed to settle into pity or hatred. They oscillate between the two. And that oscillation is the experience Oda wants, because that's the experience of understanding Doflamingo without excusing him. Doflamingo doesn't boil down to just a personal enemy to Luffy. He is a systemic villain. He represents the hypocrisy of the world government, the cycle of violence perpetuated by the celestial dragons, and the question of whether a world built on 800 years of lies deserves to stand. He is what happens when the system creates a monster and then acts surprised. His defeat at Dressrosa doesn't solve the systemic problem. It just removes one symptom. The disease is still Mary Jo. Compare Doflamingo's defeat to Hody Jones or Caesar Clown. Hody was an ideological void, rage without depth, defeated without resonance. Caesar was comic relief with delusions of grandeur. Neither forced Luffy to grow. Doflamingo forced Luffy to unveil Gear Forth, fight at the absolute edge of his ability, and rely on an entire nation's worth of allies to hold the birdcage long enough for him to recover. The victory was collective. It took a country to bring down a king. But is he done? The question stands, and in my humble opinion, almost certainly not. Doflamingo sits in level 6 of Impel Down. In chapter 906, he is shown in solitary confinement, chains on his body. He possesses knowledge of the Mary Jo national treasure, something he described as powerful enough to shake the world, requiring Law's fruit to utilize. The final saga has unraveled the world government, revealed Imu, and brought the celestial dragon's secrets into the open. Doflamingo, a man who knows the secret, who was a celestial dragon himself, who has the connections and the ruthlessness and the will, is a loaded gun sitting in a prison cell. If Impel Down is breached during the final war, if the celestial dragon's grip weakens, if the throne wars Doflamingo predicted come to pass, he will not stay in that cell. He told us this, from behind bars, in chains, with a smile. He is still waiting. So, the final verdict. What makes Doflamingo perfected as a villain is not any single element. It is the integration. The backstory feeds the philosophy. The philosophy feeds the devil fruit. The devil fruit feeds the nation building. The nation building feeds the thematic argument. Every layer points in the same direction. Here is a man who was broken by the world and decided to become the thing that breaks everyone else. Oda's specific genius is in the ordering, the patience, and the refusal to simplify. He lets you see the child on the wall, and he doesn't flinch from showing you what the child became. He gives the villain a brother who proves the trauma didn't have to end this way. He gives the villain a family he genuinely loves, and then shows that love is perfectly compatible with control. He gives the villain a speech that is partially, uncomfortably true, and then drops a rubber fist through it. And here's the final uncomfortable thing about Doflamingo, the thing I want to leave you with. One Piece is a story about freedom. That's its thesis. That's its North Star. Luffy will free the world. We believe this. We root for this. But Doflamingo asks a question the story has never fully answered. What about the people freedom doesn't save? Homing chose freedom. Freedom from Mary Jo. Freedom from the celestial dragon identity. Freedom to live as a normal human being. And freedom killed his wife. Freedom got his children crucified. Freedom got him shot in the head by his own 10-year-old son. Doflamingo looked at what freedom did to his father and decided that freedom is a lie the powerful tell the weak to keep them compliant. And then he spent 30 years proving it. He's wrong. The story says he's wrong. Luffy's fist through the bedrock of Dressrosa says he's wrong. But the fact that you have to think about it, the fact that the villain's argument requires a fist the size of a building to refute because logic alone can't quite get there, that is what makes him Oda's masterpiece.